Now, what we'll take a look at next is the other two positions, the divine command response to natural law and the prophetic ethics response to natural law. Now, we'll notice that these guys are a little more hard hitting on Peterson with regard to her view. In fact, John A. Hare here comes right out in his divine command theory response. He says, I have more disagreement with Claire Brown Peterson than with the other two authors. Okay, wow, right? And that he thinks it's to be expected because she and he are defending different accounts of what Christians should say about what makes something morally obligatory. So what makes something morally obligatory? He thinks she's giving one way of considering that, and he gives a totally different way of considering that. And so he says, based on that, he's going to show that he doesn't really agree with her. He says his main difficulty with her chapter is that she uses many different terms for the relation between morality and human nature. And it's not clear in the end what her claim is about this relation. So he lists then a bunch of ways that she defines human nature here in this first part of his article. Yeah. And says, okay, well, which one are you talking about, right? And he doesn't think that she's clear in terms of her definition of where she's going with human nature.
Right. So
that's his first kind of salve in terms of his criticism of her. He's unclear with regard to this notion of human nature. She gives several definitions of it, and he wants her to land somewhere.
Right. Right. This is what we want from a book like this, is right off the bat. I disagree. All right, good. Well, in the history of the discussion of this question, then, there have been at least two main views. And one is that of Aquinas, who needs no introduction because he's been introduced a number of times. And he says that's the person, Aquinas is the person then, who Peterson says that she is following through her paper. It's not an exegesis of Aquinas.
Right. So this is a little dig here, right? He said, right. She says she's following Aquinas, but she really doesn't give an exegesis of what Aquinas has talked about, right? So that's kind of a little dig there.
Yeah. Yeah, I follow this person, but I'm not really going to talk about him a whole lot. Well, okay. I mean, it seems to be something that you would want to include. Here's a point that I make, and Aquinas agrees with that in saying, et cetera, et cetera. And the other one is that of Scotus, whom she ignores completely. So out of the two perspectives, she's kind of hitching her horse to one, although she doesn't quite say it. And then she completely ignores this other one, which he's saying should have at least been addressed as in some capacity, because, if you're given two paths and you say, we're going to take the one through the forest, not the one through the city. Well, can you say why? Can you kind of make an acknowledgement that there's another perspective, and then you disagree with that one first because, through the city, the zombies lurk, and the forest is way easier. So this is the path to take. Okay. At least I know that there's a reference there of why the two have diverged. And with her ignorance of this, the difference between the two, he says, lies exactly in how strong a relation they hold to obtain between morality and human nature. And so
notice the issue here is, how do you connect morality with human nature? Her whole position is that our moral views come from our human nature. Our moral obligation comes from the human nature. Mm-hmm. He says, okay, so how do you connect those two? Right. That's what he wants to get at here.
Right. It's you just move the heart out of the way, you go past the lungs, and there it is right there. There's the morality center of the body. Well, he says then that Scotus, this other path that was possible to take, Scotus holds that the first table of the law, the first four commandments of the 10 commandments, is necessary, known to be the true from its terms, and so is natural law, strictly speaking, whereas the second table, the next 6, in the natural law, is only in an extended sense of the case.
Right. So the first 4, then Scotus is suggesting is where you might get natural law from, right? And he thinks that, or at least Scotus thinks that, this is the law is necessary, known from these first four. The second portion of the law, though, is only natural law, he says, only in an extended sense, right? It's only indirectly we might be able to get natural law from.
Right. So if we go live out in the hermit in the woods and we maintain perfectly the first four commandments and we never see another human being, is our telos, is our humanity, do we get the end point expressly administered? Are we good within the law then?
Right.
We just go
in other words, bearing false witness, what does that have to do with our,
right.
Our nature, right? I mean, our nature might have to, worshiping God may say something about our nature, but bearing false witness or honoring our parents, well, how does that work with regard to human nature? Right. That's what he's getting at. And so you have to work some kind of way, maneuver, in order to make that part of natural law.
Right. So if we go back to the list of the way that Peterson expresses the relationship between morality and human nature, we can see that about half of these ways would be acceptable to Scotus and half would not. What he would be perfectly happy with saying is that the law is intricately connected to our nature and that our form of life has implications for how we ought to live. But he would deny that the moral law can be deduced from our nature, or that we would know from its terms the proposition that humans ought to live by it.
Right. So notice his criticism here is the law can't be reduced from our human nature. The moral law, he suggests, Scotus would say, cannot be deduced, right, inferred just by virtue of who we are, our human nature, whatever that definition might be. And he's already suggested she's not clear on what that definition is. She gives a bunch of definitions of it.
Right. So you can love God. I have an innate sense that God has created me. I look out in the heavens. I see him. I therefore should worship him because he made all these things. I'm in abject respect for him, so I won't use his name in vain in anything that I do. But it's definitely okay to kill my neighbor and take what's his, because I mean that doesn't have anything to do with God, right? So,
or my human nature tells me to do that. So
yeah,
what's the big deal, right?
Yeah, my human nature really tells me that I want that other person's ox cart, and so I should long towards it. Well, how does that? And I'll also lie about it to get my way. Would we say that then that's included in our known moral terms as far as our relationship to God? And of course, John Hare is going to have a different explanation, which we'll get to next time. But here he thinks that she's kind of ignoring this culmination of what humanity should be, both this first table, second table perspective, and that she doesn't really even address it, which he seems to believe that she should at least acknowledge in some way this competing viewpoint from Aquinas.
And we'll notice here that what he's really somewhat subtly doing is invoking the is-ought fallacy.
Right.
Just because we are this kind of way, how does that get us to the ought of especially the second table of the moral law, right? So he's suggesting she hasn't got over the is-ought fallacy hurdle in his suggestion here. Now, he doesn't say it directly, but that's really what he's getting at, right? How do we deduce from our nature the moral law? And he doesn't think that she's given us a good way to do that. That's what he's harping on.
Right.